In the last lesson, we created a simple HTTP web request, and I've now moved this into its own method, and I've cleared out my view.did_load. And that's because we're going to try using a Xamarin component that does all of this stuff automatically for us. So let's open up our components, get more components, and the component we're looking for is a very handy one called RestSharp. RestSharp. And this is a simple client for consuming HTTP APIs. You'll notice in features, it's got this very handy automatic deserialization of XML and JSON. So previously in this course, we've looked at the JSON.NET library, and I think this uses the JSON.NET, but don't quote me on that. But it's handy that we have it automatically set in here. We can also have OAuth, various security items. Right, let's add this to the app. Let it finish downloading, and it gives you a couple of examples in its documentation. So let's do this slightly differently. Let's grab this text that it suggests we should try out, copy it, and then let's pop it into the view controller, view.did_load. Right-click REST client, and let's use RestSharp. Okay, so this is Xamarin's example site for grabbing a feed of some sort or some data. What it does is it creates a new REST client, then it creates a new REST request, and it formats a string, and this is just a fancy way of actually creating this address that we created in our old HTTP web request. Then it executes this request asynchronously, and that means that this will run, but immediately it will continue to the next lines. It won't wait for this to finish before it carries on writing or carries on executing. Then once this is executed, it will then come back here and run this section. So let's hit play, and hopefully we should get to the same sort of result in our app output. And there we have it. And now we actually have a JSON output from this. I'm not quite sure why in our HTTP web request previously we didn't have it, so maybe that's one for you to look up. Why have those two methods provided different responses? Okay, so that is basically how you use RestSharp. Now, as I mentioned before, RestSharp also gives you the ability to deserialize JSON data. And I believe this is one of the more searched for examples out there on Xamarin that don't really exist in plain English. So I'm going to create one here for you. Let's remove this client execute async and replace it with var response is equal to a new, oh, not new, this should be client dot execute. We're not going to do this asynchronously. And then this execute requires a class that our JSON is going to be deserialized to. So let's go ahead and create a simple class. I'll just comment this out for now so it doesn't mess up my formatting. Let's have a public class item. And inside of here we're going to have a public string, and this string is going to be called the root element of our returned JSON. So for this address we're using the root element is rx terms properties. Let's have a getter and a setter for that. And that's all we'll do for this class because we don't need to do anything complicated right now. So uncomment our var response, and now we can pop our item class into there. Then what do we need? We need to actually pass it over the request. And then once we have that request, we can have the console.writeLine, and we want our response.data is where it holds the deserialized data. You'll notice this is now of class type item. And then we can pull out our RxTerms properties from there and show it. So I'm going to hit play, and this is going to give me some output that grabs that root element and then prints out all of the text underneath it. Now this is a bit difficult to see as it currently stands, and what I've done is load up the original JSON that's output from that address that we're using, and you'll notice the root element is this RxTerms properties, and that is precisely the root element we've defined inside of our item class. And then what we're seeing in our application output is simply this rest of the text minus the RxTerms properties, because we're setting that as our string. Okay, so that's how you really easily and simply deserialize JSON, and it's also how you use the RestSharp library, which is also available on other .NET platforms.